Alright, in the last tutorial I took you through the process of taking one texture, assigning it to an object so that you could go through and manually select each polygon and assign it to a specific area to get an aesthetic look. Now, that's a very unusual way to UV unwrap something, to be honest. It's just kind of to familiarize you with kind of maneuvering inside that space. And so what we're going to do next is something a bit more common. There's a UV mapping technique called tiling textures, where you take a texture and repeat it and tile it across the surface of something. Part of that is also, first off, in addition to using a large tiling texture like this that tiles left, right, and up, down, you also have what are called trim textures that are meant to not necessarily tile up and down, but are meant to tile horizontally. So there's different techniques for working with that. Now, if you get the files from me, you can download those, and those will be set up in Google Classroom as well as posted up on Discord. Once you get that max file open, all right, this is what you'll see. You'll see the object, it's missing its materials. So what we need to do is come up here, rendering, material editor, slate material editor. There it is. All right. So you'll see inside it, I've already set up a multi-sub-object material, and you see I have my different materials. There's A strip, B wood, and C brick. All right. I like to label my multi-sub-object materials with A, B, C. That way when they come into a game engine like Unreal, it doesn't reorder them. It keeps them in the specific order that I like. All right. So here's my object. As you can see, if I double click here, the material is already set up and it's already assigned. You see the little hash marks. What you're not seeing is any UVs on it, because I actually went over here to Utilities, and under More, there's a utility called UV Remove, right? So if I click, UV Remove shows up, and you can actually remove UVs from an object. You can remove materials from an object. So in this case, all I wanted to do was just make sure there was no UVs on it, so that you could actually jump in there and get started. So let's come over here. I'm going to right click on this and convert to edit poly. So to start with this guy, I want to give him a base set of UVs. And so I'm going to click here on UVW Map, which is just your basic projection mapping. It takes what you have and just projects it based off of the shape of this gizmo, which you can adjust its size, right? And you could also adjust the tiling. So I'm going to take this, since this object is not flat, it's a three-dimensional object. I'm going to set it to box, and I'm going to click fit. All right. And if I look at it, so basically two of these values are the same. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it to the third, so that now I have perfectly square. I have this square box out here of UVs, and so now everything's being projected on here based off that. And since all my textures are square, this gives me a good default set for my UVs. If anything, what I might want to do is maybe I'll take this and move it up a little bit to see if I can get the brick so it doesn't get caught off right in the middle. Although it doesn't look like that's going to be absolutely right, so we're not even going to worry about it. We're just going to right click, say to convert to edit poly, and we'll deal with that later. So let's apply our Unwrap UVW. I'm going to click on the little arrow so I can see what I'm doing. Click on a polygon and say F2. All right, so let's open the UV editor. So again, by default, the preview selection's on. I roll my middle mouse wheel to zoom out. Because we're doing tiling textures, the preview could really be frustrating. So I'm just going to do Options, Preferences, and turn off Selection Preview and click OK. All right, let's move this guy over to the side a little bit, make this a little bit larger. So as I look at this, the brick will be easy enough to tweak and adjust. The wood, I think, looks fine. What we could do to test things out is if we click all IDs, you'll see the names of the materials. And so I can come in here to wood. And so now when I region select, only the wood gets selected. But take a look here when I click to the side. There's green lines. Green lines mean there is a separation where this polygon and this polygon are not connected in 2D UV space. And so if I was to grab the wood here and move it, you'll see the trim polygons, their UVs are stretching as well, because right now I'm isolating my view, but they're all still connected, as you can see here. So what I'm going to want to do before I do anything to adjust that wood is I'll come in here, come down, select wood. I'm going to region select, and then I need to find a rollout called explode, and the first option there is break. And now you see there's green edges, and so now if I go into rotate and I rotate this, I'm not messing up any other UVs. You'll also notice I keep region selecting. That's because there's a polygon on the top as well as a polygon on the bottom. All right, so let's take a look at our trim. The goal of the trim is, if I come in here and go to what I've called the strip inside the material, the goal here is we want to take all these polygons and we want to map them to one of these sorts of chunks of brick so that they consistently tile and it looks like there's a brick sitting up here. I want to create that illusion. So I'm going to region select, and that's going to select all of the trim. Now you'll notice there's big blue lines there, and that's because they're still attached in some instances to the main brick. And so again, I just want to region select here. I'm on the strip. I drag and I select those. I'm going to hit explode, and now those go away. So now I can move the trim textures and not have to worry about anything else around them. So I'm going to select this guy here and click explode. And I want to go to edge now. I'm going to click on the edge directly underneath. And you see when I click on it, the two edges here get selected. Right? And that's because I'm clicking on an edge, but that edge is on two different polygons. And so now I'm going to hold Alt and deselect the one up at the top. So only the one polygon at the bottom, which would be this guy, only his edge is selected. And what I can do is this neat little trick called stitch. Or if I come over here to this guy on the far right, stitch custom, and click on that, it should, there you go. So there is a slight delay when you're doing these options. Just keep that in mind. It's not immediate. You got to give it a second for the display to update. So basically what I've done at this point is this set of two polygons, they're both connected together now. I can right click and say move, and I can move them around. And what I want to do is I want to take this and I want to arrange it so it looks like they're sitting right here on the edge, or they make up the edge. And so I kind of want this top part to kind of be in the dark area. I'm going to come down. I clicked on freeform, and I'm going to hold control when I click on the little arrow so that it scales it uniformly. Because if I don't scale it uniformly, it may get distorted. So now what I've done, if you take a look at that, by adjusting those polygons and moving them, I've made it look like this is actually made out of this nice brick block sitting up there. So you can go through, like I just showed you, manually selecting and stitching those together. There's some ways that we could go through and do that whole process just a little bit quicker, and I'll show you how to do it, because we want to do that for all those on the top as well as all those on the bottom. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to region select across the middle here to get these rows, and I'm going to come over here to explode and click break. And now I'm going to click rotate 90 around pivot to rotate those. And I'm going to region select these at the top and rotate those until they're facing the same as the row underneath them. All right, so now I have all those guys. Now they're all rotated. And now I can come through and I can switch to edge, and I can click on an edge. And if I zoom out a little bit, I'm going to, remember I said two edges will be selected. I'm going to always deselect the one that's furthest away so that the edge at the bottom is the one that's selected, so that when I click Stitch Custom, it'll move the polygon over. Now you're not going to notice them moving because up here, I'll show you, I'm going to click to move. As I move these around, what you're going to see is that there's multiple stacked on top of them. Just like when you look here, there's multiple stacked on top of each other there. And so what I'm going to do is just come around and select my edges in this viewport here, because there's so many stacked on top there, I won't necessarily know which one I have selected. And then I can hold Alt and deselect the one that's away from our common area and go through and stitch them. And you'll notice that as I click stitch, it takes a moment for that to move, right? It's not an immediate one. Now that could be my machine, it's a little older. If you have a faster, newer machine, maybe it's running a little quicker for you. So let's orbit around the bottom and zoom in. I'm going to click on that edge, and we're always deselecting the edges that are far away from our base, right? Because we want to take this polygon and move it up there by using Stitch Custom to stitch those guys together. All right, we're just going to keep working our way around, going through and stitching. All right, so now we have all of those guys. They're all connected together, which is great. So the next step is we're going to switch to polygon here and grab all these. I'm going to move them so that the bottom corner is kind of sitting with the first guy we placed. And now I'm going to switch to freeform, and I'm going to hold Control and just drag this down to get to kind of fit. Now, we could do one last little bit here to line these up, and I'll switch to vertex. If I grab these vertices here, I'm going to align horizontal, and align horizontal, and then I'm going to grab the verts on the side and say align vertical. Just grab this setup here, align those, align these, align these. All right. And I purposely took my polygons and I positioned them in this spot. What you don't want is a situation like this where the brick comes and just ends. Like, that doesn't look right. I could come here to configure and turn off the display of map seams so you could see, like, that doesn't look right. That breaks the illusion. And so we want to make sure that we watch out for where our seams are landing. Right, so it looks like that brick belongs in that position. Right, and so now we've created this illusion that I'm going to right click and say convert to edit poly to make my UV work there permanent and orbit around. We created the illusion that this object now has this nice set of brick built on the top, right? And that's what UV mapping gives us. Now, there's a couple things we could do further to improve. One thing is if I come in here and click polygon, and I selected just this one, I see that's ID3, so I'm going to select all of ID3, and I'm going to put UVW mapping on, and you can see that the UVW map is being assigned to whatever I had selected before, so it's only affecting the block. So if I hit box there, right, one thing I could do is I could square this off, or I could adjust my V tiling. Oops, let's just drag that. I could adjust that so that it tiles so that the brick gets back to its original shape. And what I did was just drag the spinner. And what I did was I adjusted it so that the top doesn't get perfectly cut off. So that's one way. That can be a little bit tricky. It's probably easier to copy that same value. So if I take that 1270 and paste it in there and set the tile back to 1. I'm just going to right click and convert all to edit poly. If I come in here and put an unwrap on and open UV editor, I don't like how the brick's getting cut off, and so I'm going to switch to the brick and go into vertex, turn off the absolute type in, and grab the vertices at the top. Now you see they have a value of 1.918, and so I can change that to a value of 2, and it doesn't change the visual that much. And now the brick actually looks like it comes right up to the top, which is very nice. So I could grab the bottom and do the same thing, and that would be a -1. And if I right click and convert to edit poly, you see how now this platform looks like it's brick that comes to this nice terminated edge there. So That's effectively that's the process for going through and UVing something with tiling textures. This is a very simple example. You could imagine if you ever had like an elevator in a game, this would be a way that you could go through and UV map it. But you could take this idea and apply it to many other types of objects, like buildings, corridors, uh, castles, or in our cases, you could apply it to something like an arch.